Looking at Devuan Daedalus 5.0. Now bear in mind this is a beta version, this is not the final actual operating system, so I'm out here on the bleeding edge just a little bit. If you want the stable version of Devuan, you should go ahead and install Chimera. Now here is the Devuan website. Devuan is basically a version of Debian Linux, but without systemd. Now there can be a variety of reasons why you might want to try out Devuan Linux. You might be a Linux system administrator that doesn't want to have to relearn all the commands for running things in the command line. You may be concerned about your privacy and safety and think that systemd is a backdoor for the NSA, CIA, etc., or other giant corporations like Microsoft, Google, Apple, Amazon. And honestly, all of those are good goals and good reasons to run Devuan Linux. But I'm actually running Devuan Linux because of the performance. As you can see here, even with OBS running and me recording this video and everything else, the chroma green screen background cutout that I've got, everything going on, it's still running at less than 30% of CPU and at just over 1 gig of RAM. The upshot being that I can use OBS in 1920 by 1080p and still not have any dropped frames here in OBS, which is certainly something I've been struggling with a little bit in Linux Mint. So this is the default installation of Devuan Mate. Again, they're still using this antiquated two-panel top and bottom arrangement. I'm not sure why anybody's doing that anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and be changing that. I'm also going to be changing to a dark theme, so let's go ahead and go for it, shall we? So under system, now there were a couple things that I had to do to get OBS installed perfectly. One of the things I had to do was install, I believe it's called the Pulse Audio Volume Control. Now I was a little bit surprised that there's even Pulse Audio in Devuan. I thought they'd just stick with ALSA. And actually, I found that a little bit disappointing as I don't want any of Leonard Potering's software on my machine at all. One error I have noticed is that I have to keep resetting the input device's volume mix every time I reboot. It's, for whatever reason, it defaults down to like all the way down to 0, and then I have no audio in OBS. If it just defaulted up to this first notch, that would be no problem, and also if it saved my settings on reboot, then there would be no problem. As it is, this is something I'm going to have to change every single time I boot into Devuan. Although honestly, I don't reboot that often, so the only other things I've done is install OBS and install the Chromium browser and install the Brave browser. Now, if I open the browser while OBS is recording, then I do start to get some dropped frames. But if Chromium is already open, then it seems not to be dropping any frames, even while I'm scrolling and surfing the web, etc. But if I go open Chromium while OBS is already recording, I will get dropped frames. Now, also bear in mind, I'm using an almost 10-year-old laptop, an old Lenovo Yoga Play 2. This laptop was released in 2013. And yet I'm still getting full 1080p 30 frames per second, even with the chroma key cut out and running OBS and having browsers open and all kinds of stuff. So the performance is clearly superior to Mint, which did take the systemd poison pill some time ago. Alright, so let's actually start configuring the system to be usable, since by default it has this weird dual panel layout, which I really just don't care for. I mean, why would anybody care for that? It's 2022. First, I'm going to go ahead and unlock this top panel. Actually, I guess I don't unlock the panel, I just unlock specific things, like I'll unlock this one. Now let's see if I can drag it straight down to this other panel. Apparently I cannot. So instead I'll go ahead and unlock the workplace switcher down here, move it over just a little bit. Then I'll go ahead and add to this panel. And I believe what I want to add is the current date and time, or it's called clock here, so I'll go ahead and add that. Then I'll go ahead and drag that over where that's supposed to be. Now this folder icon over here on the bottom left is actually the show the desktop and minimize everything on the screen button. Hence, generally you want that to be over on the right, so I'm going to go ahead and unlock that. And I'm going to go ahead and move the, I'm going to unlock that, and then I'm going to go ahead and move that so that it's all the way over on the right. Then I'm going to go ahead and lock that where it is, and I'm going to go ahead and move this over so it's all the way up against that. Then I'm going to go ahead and lock that. Next, we're going to need to add the notification area, so we'll go ahead and add that to the panel. Notification area, add. I don't see where it got added. Actually, here it is right here, but there are no notifications in it. That's a little bit weird. I mean, you can see at the top here, I've already got some notifications showing. There are none here, so that's a little bit weird. Nevertheless, let's assume that's going to work properly on reboot, so we'll go ahead and lock that to the panel. And then we'll go ahead and move the workspace switcher over a little bit, so that it's all one contiguous little unit down here in the bottom right. And we'll go ahead and lock that to the panel. Now this section down here is called the workspace switcher, and it's already properly set up. So let's just go ahead and move that over. I already unlocked it. I'm just going to move it over just a little bit to the right so we can add some stuff here over to the left. For instance, we're definitely going to want this start menu, which is by default on the top panel, but of course we're going to be getting rid of the top panel. But instead of the classic menu, I'm going to go ahead and add the brisk menu. See what that looks like. Okay, so here's the brisk menu now. So that looks like the standard XFCE kind of menu. And I actually kind of like this one, so I think I'm going to leave this one. And like most start menus, you can pin things to the favorites. So I'll go ahead and pin a couple of favorites, pin to the favorites, pin to the favorites. And let's go ahead and add OBS into the favorites. Now, one of the things I installed earlier was the ALSA mixer. Let's see if we can see. Now, we can't right-click and uninstall that right from here, which is one of the functions I really like in Linux Mint. Because it turns out the ALSA mixer GUI didn't really help me with my issue before when I installed it, just trying to fix that issue. And now when I click on the brisk menu, there's my favorites. Let's go ahead and move that over, though, so it's all the way on the left. Then let's go ahead and lock that onto the panel. Now we've got a fully working bottom panel. All right, now let's see if we can customize the brisk menu a little bit. So we'll click on Edit Menus. And we got an error up in the top right that said, failed to launch menu editor. Please install Menu Libre or Mozo to edit menus. So I'll go ahead and log in as a root user and try and install one of those. Mozo? What's Mozo? I guess let's give it a shot, huh? Install Mozo. It's not showing up in the menu. Not sure why it's not showing up here in the menu, but I guess we can just open it manually like this. Aha, there we go. Now here's a curious one. The pulse audio volume control is actually in sound and video. I think that should be in preferences or administration. Let's see if I can move that. Well, dragging and dropping it does not work, so clearly this program, oh, it did work there. That's very weird. Did I lose it altogether, or did I drag it and drop it somewhere weird? Now, for whatever reason, pulse audio volume control is now in other, and I can't seem to drag and drop it into preferences, which is where it should be, or system. Oh, I guess I can put it in system. Huh. No, maybe not. Nope, it's still there under other. That's very odd. So that was Mozo. Maybe we should try Menu Libre. So I'm going to go ahead and apt install Menu Libre. First, I'm going to remember how to type. Menu Libre. Looks like that's a significantly larger app, so maybe this one will work a little bit better. What's it installing? GNOME menus, libgnome. Looks like it's installing a little bit more stuff. Not necessarily like that. Might be a little bloaty. So it looks like menu editor is what Menu Libre comes up in as in the brisk menu there. And you know what? This does look like it's got some more features. Let me poke around here. Now I'm seeing quite a few more options in this tool here, but I'm still not able to drag and drop it from other into system tools or somewhere where it makes more sense. So anyway, I'll give up on that project for now. One thing that bothers me is that everybody always defaults to some kind of bright theme like this. So let's go ahead and change it to dark theme. Over in the brisk menu, that's going to be under Control Center, I believe. And here's the Control Center, so let's go ahead and change appearance, I guess. There's the appearance. Oh yeah, and look, we've got Black Mate. Let's try Black Mate. Actually, that looks pretty good, Black Mate. Let's see how that's going. Oh yeah, it changes the brisk menu too. Very nice. And if I open a folder, now the folder is black instead of that bright white, obnoxious background. I guess we can further customize this here. Here's the controls, black. We can change the icons. We've got the mate here. What's Deep Sea? Should we try Deep Sea? Let's see what that looks like. Deep Sea. That didn't seem to change the desktop icon, but does it change that? Oh, but it does change the icons in here. Huh, that's kind of nice with the blue, I guess. Let's go ahead and see. We could also change back to the mate one, or Menta, whatever Menta is, kind of green. High contrast, gnome, the default gnome ones. Let's see, add Whitea. I think I like the Deep Sea the best of all those, so I guess I'll leave it on Deep Sea. And one thing that I noticed that's better about Devuan than Mate out of the box is that it comes with the GIMP installed by default. So let's go ahead and pin that to our favorites. And let's see what version of GIMP runs here. Okay, it looks like GIMP 2.10, and it already comes pre-configured in single window mode, so that's pretty nice. This is about as good as I would have GIMP out of any Linux distro, honestly. And let's go ahead and change the background. So for that, I'm just going to right click on the background and say change desktop background. That was actually pretty snappy. That was quite a bit snappier than opening the background dialog in Linux Mint, I can say that. I'm not really liking the look of any of these default ones, so I'm going to go ahead and add one. I'm going to add one straight out of my pictures folder that I've already created here, called Blue Canvas or Blueback 1080p. So that's actually looking pretty good right there. Now the fonts are good by default, so I'm going to leave those. Now I'd like to go ahead and get rid of this top panel altogether, but if I do, I'm afraid that it's not going to show me my notifications here. I'm just going to make operating OBS kind of hard. So I guess I'm just going to stop this recording and come back to it and see if it works. Alright, so I deleted the top panel and immediately my active notifications popped up down here in the bottom panel. So that's all working great now. So now I've got a working bottom panel and I've got a working, the whole thing looks good and I don't have a top panel. Now this is looking very usable out of box. Now I would recommend that the Devuan team actually switch to this by default out of the box. The last thing to do is go ahead and move over this workspace switcher, or not workspace switcher, but the window selector, I believe it's called. And let's go ahead and lock that in place as well. So now we've got a fully locked and conformed bottom panel, which is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and see what other apps are installed by default here. Looks like under graphics, we've got an image viewer. Let's see how that works. So I'm just going to open up pictures. I took a screenshot earlier. So there's a screenshot. Let's go ahead and take a look at the blue background. So yeah, this is a pretty good picture viewer. Now when I installed OBS, it also installed VLC by default. So let's go ahead and see how that runs. Let's go ahead and double click here. What's happening, party people? So today I'm looking at Devuan Daedalus 5.0. Now bear in mind this is a beta version. This is not the final actual operating system. So VLC is working perfectly, the image viewer is working perfectly, OBS is working perfectly, the GIMP is working perfectly. I've got a browser open that's working well. Let's go ahead and check out LibreOffice. Now the first time you open up LibreOffice, as usual, there's a little bit of a delay. I bet it will open a lot faster now. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck show tips on startup because I find that obnoxious. Click OK. I'm going to close this. I don't need to read the release notes, although I guess I could see which version of LibreOffice is installed here. Looks like version 7.3.1.3, so that's a pretty new version of LibreOffice actually. And LibreOffice always works great right out of the box, and it's installed out of the box. So Devuan 5 seems to be a very, very usable system right out of the box. Okay, now let's go ahead and do some fun stuff. Let's see if the Dolphin emulator is installed by default in the repositories. And let's see which version of that it is. Dolphin-Emu is the command for that. Okay, Dolphin-Emu is not available by default. So let's go ahead and see if there's any kind of emulators by default in Synaptic. Let's go ahead and open up Synaptic. Go ahead and put in my password real quick. All right, so let's go ahead and search Synaptic for emulators of any kind, see what they've got by default. Emulator. It's taking a minute to parse there. Okay, so there's quite a few different things labeled as emulator. There's an Atari 8-bit emulator. There's a fast and accurate Genesis emulator. I'm supposing that's Genesis, the old video game console. Synthesizer emulators, terminal emulators, Nintendo DS emulator, x86 emulator, DOSBox. We all know about DOSBox. Lots of different emulators in here. I'm not seeing any Nintendo emulators though. Let's see. I don't see LMNOP, so no Sneeze 90X. No. I'm not seeing any Nintendo emulators. I guess I could search for. Oh, look. Mupen 64 Plus has the plugins, but I don't see the actual emulator. Oh, here we go. Here's Nestopia. That's the old Nintendo emulator. Here's a Game Boy Advance emulator. Interesting. But I don't see Dolphin in here at all. I guess I could search for Dolphin by itself. Okay, so searching for Dolphin just by itself does not give me... it gives me the file manager, plugins for Dolphin. It doesn't look like it gives me the Dolphin emulator at all. So that's not in the repos for Devuan. That's a little weird. I guess I'll go ahead and look up BSNES to see if BSNES is in the repos either. So the different performance cores are there for BSNES, but BSNES itself is not. Let's go ahead and look up Hygan, shall we? See if Hygan emulator is in here by default. Synaptic takes a minute to parse for some reason. Oh, Hygan is here. That's interesting. Let's go ahead and mark that for installation and see what happens. Go ahead and install that real quick. There it goes. It's installing. Okay, so that's installed. Let's go check that out. All right, let's see if that shows up automatically. Let's see under games. Oh, there it is under games. HiGAN, there it is. HiGAN version 106. That's a pretty new version, I think. Now I have my ROMs on a separate drive that wasn't easy to find in the library menu, so I'm just going to try and drag and drop one, see if that works. No cartridge loaded. I guess you can't just drag and drop a ROM on there. Okay, it took me a minute, but I was able to find my ROMs directory here. So let's go ahead and open Super Mario All-Stars and World. Yikes, FPS 13. That is very slow. So let's go ahead and change some settings, see if we can't fix that. Okay, so it looks like the video is set to XSHM, which I'm not sure what that is, but let's go ahead and put that in OpenGL and see if that works a little better. Okay, so every time I try to go load a ROM, I have to go back and navigate to this directory here. Very annoying. Let's see how it loads with OpenGL now. FPS 5, FPS 13, FPS 17, FPS 12. Not very good with OpenGL. So I guess we can see if OpenGL is installed or working at all by default out of the box in Devuan. For that, we're going to have to go ahead and install GLX gears. Oh, but I got to go close Synaptic. And it says unable to locate package GLX gears. So let's go ahead and try and see if I can get GLX info. So here are the repositories that are installed by default here. Well, and also, of course, my Brave browser install. So I'm going to see if I can add another repository to this list here. I'm just going to go ahead and replicate this one up here that says packagemaster.devuan.org, but I'm going to use this one here that says deb.devuan.org. See if that helps. Okay, so I've added deb.devuan.org/merged Daedalus main. Let's get rid of that Z there. And let's see if that works. Repositories have changed. Let's reload. Let's see if we get any errors on that. Let's see, main AMD 64 packages. So it looks like I'm getting quite a bit more packages. So obviously I was missing a repo there for some reason. Not sure why that happened. I was using Wi-Fi when I did the initial install, which is very interesting and cool, the fact that I could even use Wi-Fi. I've never had that happen before, but let's go ahead and see what kind of updates we get now. Oh wow, it's really... Alright, so that was quite a few updates. However, I'm still not seeing GLX gears at all. So I'm going to go ahead and do an apt update, see what happens there. Apt update. Ooh, there are some upgrades, so let's go ahead and apt upgrade. That's all I was missing from having the wrong repos? That's a little bit weird. I guess we'll go ahead and do an apt auto remove and an apt auto clean. Why not? Yeah, so even updating the repos manually like that and doing everything that I've done so far, I still cannot see GLX gears in the repo. I can't find them. So I'm not sure what's going on here, but it looks like I've got some kind of obviously I've got some kind of OpenGL issue, because otherwise the emulator would be running much faster. All right, well, I am out here on the bleeding edge, so I'm not sure what I expected to have happen fully, but clearly Daedalus has some issues. I don't know why I don't have OpenGL installed. I'm going to do some research. Maybe I'll post an update in the comments below, but there's my review of Devuan Daedalus, working very well for OBS, which is one of the primary things that I'm doing. So I'm going to go ahead and keep using it, but we'll see how it goes moving forward and see if I can get OpenGL installed and find GLX gears and some of the things that are clearly missing from a Linux distribution that you need in the year 2022. Quick clarification, a lot of things were not missing. I just didn't know where to look for them or where to find them at the time when I was doing the review. Some things have been changed around. And remember, I'm also running on the bleeding edge here. This is not a final stable operating system release. All right, so I've been using Devuan for a couple of days now, and actually I'm editing the video now of my little review that I was working on earlier. And honestly, Devuan has been working great. I had to install a few different things that weren't installed by default for me to use it as a day-to-day driver. For example, the venerable KDE Live is installed, and I'm using it here to edit this video. OBS runs absolutely fantastic. As you can see, there are no dropped frames at all, and this is in 1080p, something that I was not able to do in Linux Mint no matter what I tried to do. Now, I've been experimenting with trying to get Wine working so I could run a few Windows apps. I haven't yet gotten Wine to work properly, so therefore I cannot play Civilization 2, sadly. Not yet. I'm sure I'll figure it out. But after finding out the dependencies and installing Dolphin-Emu, I did get Dolphin-Emu to work very well. Now the FPS is stuttering a little bit here, but I am recording in OBS, so that might be why. I had no stuttering at all when I was running Dolphin-Emu earlier. Now here, even with OBS running and recording, I was still getting even full FPS just a moment ago until I hit unpause on the OBS recording. And basically Mario Kart Wii was completely playable. Mario Kart Wii. However, obviously not while I'm recording in OBS. And as you can see with Dolphin running, I was dropping some frames here. But anyway, yeah, Internet fam, Devuan Daedalus is running absolutely great. I think I'm going to make it my daily driver for the next week, see how it goes. As of right now, I'm very happy with it. And of course, it's very exciting to have a nice clean system without System D, without any of that NSA, CIA, backdoor BS on my machine. And the performance is absolutely fantastic, absolutely clear and concise. No stutter or lag anywhere. I'm very happy with Devuan Daedalus right now. Now next, maybe I'll use Refracta and try to roll my own version of Linux. And really probably all I'll be changing is changing the default mate layout and maybe adding a few more emulators to the repos, a few other things that I find missing from the repos. Maybe even add a few of my favorite Linux Mint apps and repos. But honestly, the performance is just so much better, it's very unlikely that I'm going to be going back to Mint, at least on this laptop. Alright, thanks Internet fam, have a beautiful day. Bro, it's obviously nighttime.